Hello, everyone. Thank you, Advantage, for joining us today for this brand new digital training class. We are going to feature today the virtual listing presentation using this beautiful piece that you all have available to you at no cost. So we wanted to do a virtual listing presentation using tools that we know each and every one of you can utilize. We had initially thought we would do an interview, but because of time constraints, we're not going to do an interview. Jennifer Wadkins is your host today, and she is your presenter. And I'll tell you in a minute a little bit about Jennifer, but at the end, you will be able to post questions, and Jen will either email you back or private message you back. Because this is being posted on Facebook, and answer your questions. So don't hesitate to send her those when we finish. Jennifer got her license and started in the real estate business in 2008. Interesting time to start in the real estate business. She was active for 4 years with another company and was somewhat of a newlywed and a new college graduate. And after a year of marriage and getting into the real estate business, she found out they were starting their family. And 3 children later, Jennifer decided to put this wonderful career of real estate on hold for a little bit. And she came back to the business in 2016 and has been a climbing rock star ever since. And we are so pleased to welcome to you today the digital listing presentation using our own Advantage printed material. Please welcome Jennifer Wadkins.
Hello. Thank you so much, Debbie. And so I have fallen in love with this particular listing presentation. It's one that I find, I've always kind of struggled with a good listing presentation that I like, that works well for me. And I have found that this particular one has been, it's just like pieces of all the things that I really like to hone in on. It's very concise. And I find my clients hang on to this one a little bit more than other presentations that I've given them in the past. So that's a big bonus for me, is it's material that they're actually keeping and taking value from. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to flip this around so that you all can see my screen, and we'll kind of go through it together, and I'll just make notes of the way I present certain information and things that I say that I find just works well for me and my personal style. Like Debbie said, I would love to hear any questions that you have, and also if you do it a different way or just kind of have some input, I'd love to hear that as well, because I learn from others all the time. So I'd love your input there. But let me flip this around and make sure that everyone can see everything. And before I get right into the presentation, there is one thing, and I'll kind of set you up for how I'm doing things virtually right now. I am still doing somewhat of a pre-listing appointment. I do, when I go into my listing appointments, I've spent time on the numbers and things like that. So I have already either seen like a Facebook walkthrough of the home, or I am familiar with the home. And so when I go to the actual listing appointment, even if it's virtual, what I'm doing is I have these questions. They're questions that I always have with me on every listing appointment. I print them off though, and I set them to the side. And I usually tell my client something to the effect of, hey, I'm a mom of 3 kids. My mind's always in a million different directions. Do you mind if I jot down a few notes? And they're always fine with it. I tell them that because I don't want them to feel like I'm distracted if I'm looking off to the side and writing something down, or that I'm not hearing everything that they're saying. When I kind of give them that notation, they know that it's me actually engaged with them and still with them at the time. So I do kind of preface things that way. And then I go in here to my client questionnaire, and I do make sure that I have like complete contact information so I can get them into command correctly and have kids' names and birthdays and all of that good stuff for later down the road. I do not go through these questions with them and ask them to them verbatim. I just keep it off to the side. I make notes on this paper, and then it kind of keeps my flow of conversation going. I can be a talker, and I can go down rabbit trails. And so this keeps me on track and makes sure that I get all the information that I need when I leave an appointment. So that's just something that I have to decide. These questions are nothing special. You know, I go into a little bit of motivation. A lot of these questions are also mirrored in the actual listing presentation. This is just kind of for me. If anyone wants a copy of this, I'm happy to share it with you. But there's nothing, you know, groundbreaking in here or anything like that. It's just questions I've taken from other, either, you know, the pre-listing questionnaire or other listing presentations. So that is what I have here. And then let's flip over, and I'm going to make this full screen so that we can see it in its full glory. Okay, there we go. So as Debbie showed you, this presentation is absolutely gorgeous. It is, that's one of the things that I really like about it, is the way it presents. It is very professional, very streamlined. There's not a lot of visual clutter on the pages, and the information is all presented in these little bites that you can quickly look at and gather what information you need from it, which is why I think clients take so much value from this particular presentation. It's not one where they're having to read paragraph or scan through several different slides or flip several different pages to find, you know, a quick answer to their question. The other thing that I like about it is the way it naturally flows just works for me. It's kind of how I go through my listing presentations, and it's kind of in the order that I've always just been fond of. So I really like that about it as well. I like doing this virtually and having this type of professional material virtually, because I do find that when we're behind a computer screen or, you know, FaceTiming on a phone or something like that, it feels much more casual. And I tend to have a casual approach with my clients. A lot of my clients are centers of influences or referrals, so we have some type of connection. And it just feels more genuine for me to be very conversational, very casual. But with that, there also needs to be that professional buffer. There needs to be a level of professionalism there, so that they don't just see me as, oh, it's Jennifer, my friend. They know that truly I'm a professional and I'm going to represent them that way when listing their home. So that kind of helps me and takes it up a notch for me, so to speak. So you can see this is kind of the first page. It's gorgeous. Then I sit down with them and I go through this, you know, first content page. And I sat down with them, and if it is someone that I know, and in all likelihood it probably is, I kind of make a little joke that, look, I'm going to ask you these questions. It's going to feel like I'm interviewing you or interrogating you a little bit, and just kind of we laugh it off. And I say, I know it's going to be awkward, but this really helps me in my process so that I can best represent you. And we go through these questions with them, and we really delve into their motivation. And these questions I use verbatim, because it pulls information out of them that I need, like their motivation and their timeline and things like that. If I have a personality type that, you know, doesn't really want to get into a big long spiel with me about everything, I will, you know, take a key phrase that they've said to me and kind of throw it back to them in a question format and maybe get a little bit of information out. And this is where I end up writing a lot of my notes. So I do spend a little bit of time here with my clients. One thing I forgot to mention is, before I go into this, I do kind of let everyone know what the schedule is for our appointment, and that we'll be going through this information first, and then we'll be getting into pricing. I'll have CMAs. I very well could have absorption rate for them if it's a listing where I feel the need to go in there and do that. So they know that that information is forthcoming, because if it's a very to the point person, they want that information, they want it quickly, and they're impatient going through this if I don't let them know that it's coming. And you know, I also stress that, you know, bear with me on this. This just really helps me get the information that I need, so that it kind of settles their nerves a little bit, and they know that we're going to get to the nitty-gritty of what they're really seeking. So I do let them know that. Then we go through these questions. I spend a good amount of time on these questions, and then the rest of it, I go through and try to be a little bit more brief and time conscious as I go through the rest of it. But this is important to me. I'm really big on, I have to understand where someone's coming from. It helps me throughout the entire process of listing their home and negotiating and things like that. So I do that. There are obviously, you know, a lot of people could probably go through this a lot faster. It's just, I'm a talker. So that's where I tend to linger. But then we get into this page, and this page to me is probably the reason why clients hang on to this. It kind of explains the process to them, and it's a really good, quick way for them to look back and think, now what comes next, or where am I going with this? Or they might associate, you know, what's written here with something that I've explained to them about the process, and it triggers their memory. They like, it's almost like a mini checklist. And I have some clients that are, you know, list checkers. And so they want to go through and they want to check through the process and make sure that they're on track with everything. And, you know, they'll call me and say, now, are we here? Can I check this off? And, you know, that works well for them. And this is kind of what I mean about, you can grab quick bites of information from this without reading through paragraph after paragraph. When I go through this section with clients, this is where I do a couple of things that I just do because of experiences that I've had. And one of the things that I like to do from the get-go with my clients is plant little seeds, just so that they're not shocked later down the road, or that they remember something, or that they're kind of mentally preparing for things. And a really good but kind of odd example of this, but I've had this come up multiple times, is one thing that I will make note of here is often the final walkthrough. And I do that because I have had a few sellers that have been really shocked at the end that a buyer is doing a final walkthrough. And sometimes they're almost a little bit annoyed by it because they feel like it's interrupting their moving process, or it's an inconvenience. And so I make a note of that here and say, hey, you know, after we get you packed up, there's going to be a short window of time where the buyer needs to be able to do a final walkthrough. And I explain that process to them so that when we do get to that point in the transaction, they don't feel like, oh, this is a buyer, you know, being nitpicky, or this is, you know, an inconvenience to me or a special circumstance. They understand that it's just part of the process. And so it takes out that emotion from it. And again, you know, that's just something that I've learned from experience with my particular sellers and clients that I've had. Another thing that I like to point out at this point in time is I often tell people, hey, you know, even if they're seasoned sellers, you know, I know you probably know this, but there will be inspections and an appraisal. And I kind of make the distinction between the two because even, you know, just in general conversation, it's easy to kind of crisscross those two terms, especially when you're not doing this every day. So I, you know, make the note of that. And then we get into the marketing section. I do stop after every page and just say, do you have any questions? Is, you know, anything that you want to make a note of to me in this section? And oftentimes they have some type of feedback or something that they want to go over again. And so we make sure that we do that. And then when we get into the marketing section, again, I love this because
Hey, Jen,
yes,
I hate to interrupt you, but
yes.
I'm only seeing your question page from the beginning. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, can you reshare? Because I'm not sure everybody's seeing the pages of the presentation.
Yes, let's go back. Let me stop sharing and let's reshare.
I don't want them to miss this. This is too good.
Let's try it this way. Okay.
Ah, perfect.
There we go.
Okay.
And, okay, so just briefly to recap, this first section is where I kind of go through and have the questions with my clients. And we spend a lot of time talking about this. And then this is the page we were just on with the process. And so as you can see, it's like a little checklist, and it's really good for you know, them to be able to quickly grab that information. It also, I like the way this is laid out because just all of the pages and all the information, with it being visually something that you can quickly grasp onto, it keeps me on track so that I don't start rambling or going down rabbit trails. So that is this page that we just went over. And let me see. I was trying to see if I could get this full screen for you. And I don't know if I can. Oh, nope. Let me make it a little bit smaller. Okay. So you can see a little bit more of the page. But so this is where we get into marketing. And I love this because this says here on the side, your custom marketing plan. And that is big to me. I stress this with every client. When I sit down with your home, I truly create a custom marketing plan. I am not, you know, I don't have a format that I just throw all the houses into and that's how we do it. I have systems that work for me, but each house kind of has a unique character that you really have to focus more heavily maybe on one area versus another. So for instance, if we weren't in this crazy time and it were a scenario where we could do open houses and I knew it was a home that would do very, very well with open houses, that would be a very heavy part of my marketing plan, and I would share that with my client and how I go about open houses. Right now, we're not really able to do that, so I focus more on here's how we're going to do like digital open houses and digital walkthroughs. And I've even been telling clients that we can, if you know your neighbors on Facebook and things like that, we can reach out to them, ask them if they would please share, just like we would if we knocked on their door and just said, hey, and I introduced myself, that I can do that through Facebook. And then of course I send them a thank you card just saying, hey, thanks for sharing that. And we can even prompt them and, making a post saying, hey, come be my neighbor, or, something to that regard. So I focus in a little bit on that. If it's a house that I know is like an Instagram dream house, then I am going to obviously have that thing on Instagram like crazy. This is another point in the presentation where I really like to hone in on the fact that I look at my Facebook logistics and numbers, and I look at Instagram, and I look at YouTube Facebook logistics, or YouTube logistics and numbers. And so I see that information and I see the kinds of things that work and that don't work, and I'm always adjusting from there. So I have some of that insight when I go in and I'm creating posts about your home, and I'm using it that way. So I do talk about that a lot. And that kind of helps me with when I preface these video tours, because in my personal experience looking at numbers on video tours, and this has kind of been something that I always bounce around with in my own head, I see the numbers on the more vloggy type walkthroughs where it's me with my phone and give a quick intro and then turn the screen around and walk through the house and make comments. I think Brittany Winery had a really good mastermind on that last week or the week before. And those types of walkthroughs tend to do better for me performance-wise in the numbers and the views than the ones that are, set to music and, just kind of slides or, just quick video clips all put together. So I do talk to clients about that. It helps them understand that, there's research behind how I market and what I'm doing. And hopefully that puts them at ease and makes them feel a little bit more comfortable with me. I talk in this section, I focus a lot on that right now because obviously we're kind of in a virtual and a digital listing market. So I focus really heavily on that. A lot of what I do is social media marketing anyway. And so this has kind of fit very nicely in with that, but I will make note of things just depending on the particular home. I'll highlight a certain area of this and talk about it. I am skipping one thing that's important up here in this section. One thing that I do go over pretty much with everyone is photography. And I tell sellers that this is where I'm going to have you take off your seller hat for just a second and put on your buyer hat. And if you're a buyer and you're going to look for a home, what's the very first thing you're doing? And most of the time their answer is, well, we go to Zillow, or we go to realtor.com, or we go online and we look at pictures. And so that's where I really drive home that the photography is kind of like our first make it or break it item with listing and marketing your home. We have to have good pictures. And I put a lot of emphasis on this because I want them to have their home truly picture ready and not see the photography as just kind of a preliminary pass-through step. I want that to be very heavily emphasized in their minds, so that when we show up and we do photography, that we, it is like at its pristine best. And then showings happen from there based on how your home's picturing, and that's kind of sets the standard too for you as where your home needs to be when it is showing time, that this is kind of the standard that we're going to work from when it's time to show your home. So I go into that on this page a lot. And then on this next page, it's kind of a continuation. I tell them that we're going to get to the pricing in depth in a moment. I do talk about staging a lot in this section and kind of make the distinction between designing your home and staging your home. When we stage your home, we're staging it more from the perspective of how does this flow through your home? How is this appearing in pictures? We're creating little vignettes where people are standing and possibly talking in your living room about the aspects of your home that they like, or talking in the entry hall, things like that. Whereas when you design a home, you're designing it for overall living and more of a 360 functionality versus just kind of a flow. I do talk about how we stage it for pictures, and we may change some of that staging a little bit for actual showings. But I go through that with them, and I tell them that we are going to fully walk through the home after we get everything signed and ready to go, and we're going to really come up with a good plan for staging. I do often point out this targeted networking, and I talk to them at this point a little bit about reverse prospecting and things like that. I also talk to them a little bit about the network that is Keller Williams and what that provides us as agents. And I go into just kind of relationships that I have being from this area and being in this business, and all the connections that we make through interacting with each other. So I go through that. And then I touched briefly on these things, but like I said, I delve heavily into the CMAs and absorption here in a minute. So I do use this finding your buyer section to note a couple of things. One of the most important is being that your buyers are kind of finding your house on the internet first and foremost. And so that is why it is so important that we have good pictures. And another thing that I note at this time, and I kind of make a joke about it, but usually your buyers have seen your home somewhere on the internet, they've looked at the pictures, and then they develop what I call a house crush. And then they are stalking the pictures of your home, and they're looking at them multiple times, and they're dissecting them, and they're looking at a doorway thinking, I wonder if that goes to the left or to the right, or does that lead to the master bedroom, or things like that. So they are analyzing your photos in detail. And that again helps kind of drive home that we need our pictures to be top notch. And so from there, we kind of get into pricing, and here I just kind of set the stage for what we're going to have a conversation about in just a few moments. And that is basically that, every home has kind of a market value range that is its true market value, what a buyer is willing to pay for a home and what a seller is willing to sell it for. And I don't get too much into kind of how the real estate market flows and works, because I do that usually when I start my CMA. But I do kind of make a note here that obviously, if we're pricing your home too high, my experience has been then we start having to make these price reductions, and then we start having to try to catch up with the market. And when we do that, we tend to have to go under it in order to catch it. And then you're probably selling your home for less than what we would have originally sold it for if we stuck with kind of our market value range. And then obviously we don't want to go too low because that can create some problems as well. Though, in our market, that's kind of hard to do. So, but I go through that briefly with them. And then this final page is kind of, I pause again and just say, do you have any questions about the process or our marketing or where we're going with this? And usually they're good. And then I say, okay, let's get it down into the nitty gritty. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen for just a minute so I can go back in, and I'm going to share with you just a couple more things from there. I go into my CMAs and see, I actually think I've got one pulled up. Yes, okay. Can you see that?
Yes, got it.
Okay. So this is when I'll pull out my CMAs, and I am someone that, you know, if you've ever seen me in my office doing CMAs, you've probably laughed at me because when I first sat down with property or to do my research, I kind of become a mad woman and I start running a CMA one way, and then I will go in and I will run it about 10 different ways and tweak little things here and there because I want to get a full comprehensive grasp of this home or this neighborhood or this market. And then I do not print all 10 and give all 10 to clients because I think it would probably make their heads explode, or it would make mine explode trying to go back and think about my logic at the time when I was doing them. But after I kind of do that several different ways, I will go back in and I'll do a precise CMA where I pull actual legitimate comps. This is also a time where I might kind of just set the stage for how an appraiser is going to go in and pull comps and how that process is going to work. Again, I try not to go too heavy into anything because it's distracting and it makes it hard to focus on the information at hand, but I might kind of just throw that little seed in there. And so I will go through my CMA with them at this time. What I love about doing these listings virtually right now is it is so easy to then pop over, and I don't know if you're going to see this if I pop over, but I would have my matrix already pulled up and probably my homes in a cart that I'm using for the CMA, and I would pop over and we could go through the actives for sure, and they could see what their direct competition is going to be, which I think is really, really helpful. And then we would probably go through the close ones as well and just let them take a look at that. And so from there, oftentimes I will go into absorption. And I don't necessarily bring my absorption sheets with me to every listing. There are some listings that I 100% absolutely do. But I can almost guarantee you that the same way that I run CMAs about 10 different ways, I also run absorption with almost every listing, at least for my own knowledge. I like to go in, I rely very heavy on the numbers and what they're telling me. And I like to go in and let my clients, you know, kind of see my process there and really be that expert on pricing and be precise with it. So that they have confidence and faith in me that I know what I'm doing when I'm throwing these numbers out here, and they're not just, you know, me kind of grasping at straws, that there's research and behind it. So we really take time to go through that. And then from there, we sit down and we, you know, talk about, okay, are you ready to list your home tonight? And we sign paperwork. And again, I really like doing this right now virtually because I can shoot the paperwork over to them at that time. And then if necessary, at that same time, we can continue our conversation and then go through the listing documents. And I am really big on, I do go through kind of section by section on all listing documents. And even if it's a seasoned seller, I ask that they're patient with me while I just go through it. It makes me feel better knowing that I've actually verbally gone through it with them. And so that's kind of a benefit. There's definitely some things with these virtual listing presentations that I'm seeing that really work well for me and I really like. So I will maybe be taking some of that when we get back to kind of our normal status of things and carrying that over with me. But this is definitely my favorite listing presentation. It's the one that I use the most. I've gotten really good feedback from clients. So if you haven't taken a look at it, I would strongly recommend it. The print version of it is absolutely like stunning, stunning quality. And of course you saw that virtually it shows very, very well as well and flows nicely. So anyway, that's kind of how I'm doing that aspect of it and where I'm going with things. And I look forward to reading if you all have any questions or comments or anything like that. And I'd love to have a conversation about this. So I hope everyone has a great day. I hope everyone's still doing well with all of this. And I hope to see you all very, very soon.
Jennifer, thank you. That was amazing. Thank you so very much for your professionalism and your expertise. And thank you for utilizing what I think is just a beautiful tool that you all in Advantage have available to you. So when this post, if you all have questions after having gone through this with Jennifer, don't hesitate to post your questions because she will answer them. And those of you who know Jennifer well know she'll answer your phone calls as well. So thank you so much. Thanks to your family for giving you away for this time so that you could make this recording. And everybody, we look forward to doing this again on Wednesday. So thank you.
Yes.
Have a good day, everybody.